just about 6 o'clock. Everyone has some food. Is Alice coming tonight? Do we know?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so we're going to try to stick to a 2-hour meeting, but of course that is always a little tight. Thanks for coming, everyone. We have a few things going on tonight, and I'll talk you through what we're going to do. We are going to talk about some procedural stuff because there was a vote at Dummerston this week that we need to talk about and address and figure out how we're going to proceed with that. We have the minutes to approve. We're going to do public comments at the beginning, as we have done. We'll probably do that after, let's see. I'm not exactly sure when we'll do that because I try to do that efficiently. Then we're going to do a work session, and at that point where there's not going to be, we sometimes do exchange back and forth with the public. Because we have so much work to do, we're going to really hunker down and just, the committee is going to be discussing these things, and then at the end, so we won't be bantering back and forth with the public during that stage. If there is time at the end, there will be an opportunity for public comment.
And then I'm sure we have pencils and paper over here somewhere if anybody needs it to write things down during the meeting.
But so just know that if you try to talk during this middle of the meeting, I won't be recognizing you. Then we're going to review schedules. I don't know how many minutes we planned, meetings we planned out, but we do have a meeting on the 17th, and then right on the 22nd. So for the thick of the agenda, we're going to talk about some of the report language, and then we're going to talk about other options. So we'll see what we get done. The first thing to talk about is at the most recent Dummerston meeting, there was a vote to take one Dummerston member off the study committee. So I heard about that yesterday morning, and Ron and I chatted, and we went ahead. It's our understanding that the study committee is an independent body, and so we suspected that wasn't possible, that members once appointed are appointed. So we sought legal counsel. We reached out to Chris Leopold, and he researched it over the last 2 days, and he talked to Nikki South, who's at the Agency of Education, and he talked to Donna Rosso Savage, also at the Agency of Education, and also Nicole Mace, who's at the Vermont School Board Association. And he came back and he reported, Ron and I talked to him at length this morning. And I'll share with you what he shared with us, his opinion based on, his own legal opinion, and also he said that there was clear consensus amongst that group, and then we can decide how to go forward. He advised that such an action taken at that meeting is not in the spirit or the intent of Act 46 and the statute language around Act 46. He said the study committee is an independent legal body. When a study committee is formed, members are appointed to the study committee by a school board. These are formal appointments in a statutory process. Subcommittee members, study committee members do not serve at the pleasure of the town board that appointed them. And the process is supposed to be open and transparent. The process of the study committee, as we are all aware, is very open. This is working together here is essential, and it's essential that that the entire process continues from the very, very beginning to the end. They clearly structured members considering that. The process presumes that people are going to act in good faith and does not address bad faith. Thus, the action at the Dummerston School Board was not addressed because the presumption was that that sort of thing would not occur. So the process did not fit into the framework of the statutes and the law, and we now need to talk about it, figure out how to progress.
He also said that typically if there's a replacement for a subcommittee member, it would because somebody has gotten off the board or resigned from the board, that sort of thing, and the board obviously needs to replace that person. But when you have a standing member, that was the issue.
Right.
That it's not a subcommittee board.
And if the study committee member does not resign, then they remain on the study committee.
So we actually have one of those potentially, but I don't know if Matt's officially resigned or not.
I'm seeing that he hasn't resigned because he's sitting down, so he is a member.
We haven't had a board meeting.
But that would be a good example of the Vernon board at their next meeting, whether they want to confirm if Matt is interested in continuing. You do have an alternate as well, and you might decide that your alternate should be your voting member.
But right now, Matt's your voting member unless he decides otherwise. But that's a definite. So we're not gonna take an exchange now. This is we're talking.
It's just a question.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about this right now.
Okay.
Yes.
So as with everything, could we get an opinion in writing, a legal opinion in
Could
writing
you
on
speak a
this?
little louder, please?
Sorry. Is it possible to get a legal opinion in writing so that we can research it ourselves and respond
Okay.
as a board?
We can ask him to write that up for us. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, he said that there's nothing in the statute. He felt it was the spirit and the intent of.
I see. So it's a spirit, not actually, something in Alice's wording made it seem like there was a statute that required this.
He
but
did
it's a
refer to
spirit.
Title 16, 706B.
So it's the spirit of the statute. It's not a legal opinion we have, it's an interpretation of the spirit of a statute.
Right. So
Okay,
the spirit of the law assumes that such actions will not
So
take place.
Chris's opinion is of the spirit of the law, not a legal opinion reading of a statute about appointees by a school board. Just trying to reiterate and clarify, especially for people that are squinting because I'm talking
Right,
to you.
so in the statute, people are appointed to this study committee, which is a legal independent committee.
For life.
So are there cases where someone could be removed from the board other than they're resigning on their own?
He said
He said if someone is dysfunctional on the board, doesn't contribute, and doesn't attend.
So then it would be the school board where the individual, the town where they came from, would take action to remove them?
No, I would imagine that would come between that. It could probably, that conversation, I would imagine, would originate at either the study committee or the school board. I would imagine that if it originated at the school board, that would have to be a discussion with the school board and the study committee or the other member, But, I mean, you could play it out, but I would probably seek legal counsel on that.
Am I allowed to talk?
Why don't we let everyone else talk first?
Well, can I say something?
I have a card, that's why I'm not part of the committee.
Well, you have a card, I've got a card too.
No, I wasn't, Mark, it's not about you and me.
No, it's not, it's just that, I heard the second part of what you said, Alice. The first part, the spirit, this whole thing, trying to get this Act 46 together is built on spirit and imperfect law. So we're relying more on the spirit to pull this thing together than we are anything else. The second part of what you said, Alice, had to do with the, removing somebody from the committee for lack of attendance, contribution, and meaningful attendance and participation. I would say there's second to none. Amy has been the clerk, participated in everything, has been to each of the meetings, has extended herself in extra hours and days far beyond most of the people on this board. Now, I don't know what drove the Dummerston school board to decide that a change of individual was necessary, but I think it's an ill-conceived idea to take someone with a wealth of information that has been accumulated in Amy and replace it with, no offense, Dan, but with somebody who has been watching and not actively participating. And that's just my thought, for what it's worth.
I'm seeking More thoughts, more opinions? Ricky?
Well, I'm concerned with the process, I think, too, because as I feel like that there's been some negative intention between Amy and other members from the community of Dummerston, and maybe the board members may not have. And there was one board meeting, one of our meetings when it was wrapping up, I thought I was going to have to stand between somebody attacking Amy and Amy because somebody was going after her. And I feel like this process was done really poorly. If somebody's uncomfortable or unhappy with somebody's performance and whatever their role is, there should be a way to have that conversation without it being a removal or a replacement with somebody who's somebody who you feel more comfortable with or better with. And I agree with what Mark said too about the fact that Amy's knowledge and experience, because it's not only been these meetings, but it's been the little subgroups that have gotten together. She's been at most, if not all, of those little groups that have gotten together too. So she's put a lot of work and effort into this, and probably sitting at this table probably knows the most out of any of us elected people, of anybody that's sitting here, because she's been paying attention and really on top of it.
Kim?
I mean, excuse me, I completely agree with what Ricky said. I mean, I understand that and I don't know what happened at the Dummerston board. You know, everybody can kind of have their own ideas of what happened. But if it's because she didn't have the same ideas as other people in town, that's not a reason to not have somebody on the board and to take away their voting rights with everything, and all of the hours that all of us have sacrificed with our families, with our jobs, with everything, and to slap them in the face like that is very disappointing.
Matt? Ian?
I'm kind of processing. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure where this comes from. Not being part of that community. It does seem rather unfair and abrupt.
Beth and then Amy, can you?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add either. It sounds like it's an issue within Dummerston. I guess my only question would be, I think all of the boards, at least Guilford met too, thought that we had to re-vote each other because we did the same thing in Guilford. So if there was ill intent, I wouldn't support it. But as far as the process goes, if it was a misunderstanding maybe, that's at Guilford we re-voted in a person too. So I don't know if the process is clear, but I don't like the feeling of this at all.
Yeah, I guess that would be the question: is what was this process and what is the intent of this vote?
Yeah, if I could just speak, I was at the Guilford meeting Monday night when we did the committee reports, as we do with every board or reorganization. And at the end, there was kind of the affirmation about the study committee. And I hadn't even thought about, well, it's really not a subcommittee. And I think through your discussions, you decided, it made sense that Beth stays as voting member. There was some discussion whether you wanted to continue as a voting member,
Right.
and whether Alice wanted to switch or an alternate, new
Right.
member become
Yeah,
an
so
alternate.
it was up for discussion. Yeah.
But I think you guys worked through it and said it makes sense to keep it the way it is.
Right.
Now, had I talked to Chris Leopold last week, I would have been able to be of help, I think, to say, well, it's really not a subcommittee of the board. And then Tuesday night, kind of a similar situation, at the end of the subcommittee appointments, there was a motion made, and I'm thinking, wow. Again, I felt ill-equipped to respond to that. And I wish I had more information at that point. Because there wasn't really much talk about, so I think there was a comment, well, it'd be nice to change things up. So,
Amy, would,
Just to answer Ian's question, when I asked why, there was absolutely no discussion. When I asked why, I was told that it was good to get fresh.
so how would we like to move forward?
Point of order. Out of fairness, which is what you're trying to do, be open and fair. I've sat here and listened and been vilified, or I feel that way. Amy shouldn't have to be made to feel poorly, nor should anybody, myself included. I think that people are feeling, or sharing a lot of very negative feelings that they're making assumptions on. And I guess that is easy. It's not a big leap to go there, but from my perspective, this is an individual town board who's representing our town, Dummerston, and we, as a board, made a decision. It wasn't punitive. We don't have any problem. Shouldn't even say it that way. Amy's been around a long time. I've almost been on the board as much as Amy has. Amy's done a lot of hard work. Every year, we reconstitute our committees. I understand that this is different. I don't think anybody has gone through an Act 46 process before. I don't think anybody wants to do it again, probably. But I don't think there's any case law here. There's no history on this. WSESU, we appoint members to that every year. That's not a subcommittee. So it's not a stretch at all to understand, from our perspective, from my perspective, to understand how we got there. There's nothing in any statute, in any process, that says this is not allowed or not even contemplated. As a board, there are many things we wouldn't have done had we known the perspective that has been given to us over the last 4 or 5 months about what the study committee's for, about why we joined. We joined to study. We didn't join to do a lot of things that you're doing. We didn't know when we voted people in that it was forever. We never would, it's not something we even contemplated, and that's the response we're getting, is that that's this lawyer's interpretation. So I go back to, we are an individual town, and it seems silly that a group of towns that have expressed throughout this process, I've been to almost every meeting, that have expressed that they want to care about all the towns involved, and they want to respect the town's opinions and the town's right to do things that are best for the town. And what I'm hearing now is that this board, it's almost like it's been set up as a trial, that you're not going to allow a town to do, a town governing body that's been elected by the town to do what it feels is the right thing to do. And I think a lot of people would have a problem with that. And I'm hoping that you can at least see that side of it and respect the town's desire, the school board's desire to do what we did and why we did it.
And as has been said, Vernon doesn't meet till Monday, but it was my presumption that at Monday's meeting, Matt would come off this group and we would pick someone new. We hadn't even talked about it. It was just my presumption. I didn't think Matt could continue on. And I'm just a little surprised that if the school board in Vernon was given the responsibility to choose the members, then we no longer have the responsibility to make changes throughout the process. And once again, it really never came up from the very earliest conversations about the study committee. But I was a little surprised.
So it's not only our legal counsel, it's all the folks up north, it's our 3 people who seek legal advice through the state who also have this analysis. Yeah.
I wonder if the Dummerston board would like to have one more meeting to think about it, given the information. And if we put this off until the next meeting and make some sort of a decision then, and look at that, given the information that's been presented in the legal information. I mean, I think we've done a really good job of letting voices be heard from the public, no matter who's been specifically sitting at the table. And I think the charge has been very clear that we are to look at some sort of a merger potentially between our towns and the supervisory union. And at this point, that's all we've been doing. We've concentrated on one more because that's the one with the biggest deadline. And we still have not actually come down to a vote of where we're going next, although the clock ticks loudly.
I would agree with Jill's comment. I think this is a process question. I think it's clear that different boards didn't understand what the nature of the study committee is or was. We've got legal opinion and state opinion. I think it's appropriate to have it go back to those boards with that further clarification and let them resolve it there as opposed to airing it here. This seems to be not the place to air what happened in an individual board or an individual decision. To me, it's really about the process and let that process work.
Actually have not gotten to speak to this, I just asked for a clarification of the legal opinion, so it'd be okay if I've been here all along.
Could you speak up?
I'll do my best, sorry. I want to be clear to everybody in the board that this was in no way in judgment of all the hard work that Amy has put into our board and every other board. And I want to be clear that we all have the highest respect for everything that Amy has done over the years. And the decision was not meant to be punitive to Amy. And it was probably one of the hardest decisions I've had to make in any format. So I just would like the record to be clear that that was not the intent. And it frankly is bothersome to hear that that is what is said of our local board, that our intent was to be punitive to somebody, because we had no intent of being punitive or disrespectful. We were reorganizing every board, and so, it was trying to do something that reflected what the new board makeup was. And we thought that that was our right to control our local board makeup. And I guess it's very concerning to hear that even though we haven't merged, we can't control the reflection of our local board and how we perceive what our community is expecting. And we haven't even merged yet. So if you have concerns about local control of this, I'm already feeling like people get to say that we're punitive or we've done things without having been there. So that's a little bit upsetting for me to hear.
Well, we're not taking any comments right now.
I mean,
We'll be open for public comments in a few minutes once this process is under.
I don't know, I mean, the fact that there was no discussion whatsoever, there was no warning of agenda items on this particular topic specifically, it did feel punitive and vindictive, and it goes along with the personal insults and the physical intimidation that I have been experiencing from members of the board, Dan in particular, and
Point of
his-
order, this is not a trial, this is ridiculous, Alice. You
This is
need
an
to
ex-
have some decorum in this
Agenda.
environment, please. I beseech you,
I am.
please.
Can you please continue, Amy?
You know,
Did you want to say something more?
after the meeting that Ricky mentioned where he saw the incident with Dan's parents, I was afraid about coming to these meetings. I've never had the public or other boards in my 12 years of experience on a school board behave in such a fashion. And it is a horrible representation of, I think, our town. I have to believe it represents a minority.
Thank you, Amy. Does that,
I
Mark?
say one thing, I started off by saying that the only thing that's driving this through to any fruitful conclusion is going to be the spirit of cooperation among the members of this committee. And I want to support what Jill said, maybe take this back to the Dummerston board to work this out. If this is going to be a harbinger of what it's going to be like to try to get the 6 boards to work together, boy, we screwed.
Is that consensus? Yeah, Ian.
I just have it's a comment and a question to clarify the legal thing. Like, how much is that? It sounds like a lot of stuff we've said going on here really should be happening in Dummerston, not in this forum. My question for clarification on the legal ruling is, if I understood what you were saying, it sounds like the legal counsel is that the Dummerston board doesn't have the authority to do this, but it also sounds like we don't have it either. That we could only change a member for cause, like they're not showing up. Is that what you were telling us?
Yeah.
Well,
I
as a
think
point of order, we did change on Brattleboro, but we had a letter of resignation from David, and we already had an alternate.
A voluntary resignation.
I got a letter of resignation from David. Okay, so I'm gonna, the Dummerston chairs in the room, I'm gonna pass this off to you. You guys can talk about this at your next meeting. I have some contacts for you to reach out to directly. Sound good? Sounds good? All right, so we're gonna move forward.
And
Yeah.
further, I'd suggest that in the spirit of cooperation that we're attempting, let's let everybody sit at the table and speak as they would be a normal all members. So tonight, Dummerston, you all get 3 voices, just like Brattleboro.
You'll only speak in 2/3 volume.
Okay.
Does that work for everyone for this meeting? Matt? Yeah. Okay, great, thank you, everyone. I'd like to take time now to hear from you guys. I know that several of you have something to say. 3 to 5 minutes a person is what we usually aim for. So Amy passed around, our clerk, passed around a piece of paper. Would you please write your names on it if you're sitting here and joining us? And when you speak, please say your name and what town you're from.
And before you do, can you guys hear better? Should I try to get that fan off?
Very hard to hear.
I'm gonna go try to find someone to see if I can get that off. I don't know if I can.
So remember, there's not a lot of exchange here. We're hearing and absorbing what you have to say and what you're sharing. So who's something to say? Okay, so you put your hand up first, so why don't we start with you and then move on to her.
Debbie Hebert, Vernon Town School Board. I'd like to know if it was ever explained to the boards when the appointment was made, that the process here, that once a member is appointed, that they would never, because it was our intention in Vernon, to my knowledge, on Monday, we will reorganize, and we also were going to reappoint because Matt is no longer a board member. So was that explained at the time?
It was not.
It was not.
And it was not, and it was just recently, because of this change, that we sought that advice. The example was, well, if every board, when they reorganize, change your subcommittee members, you'd have no consistency in terms of people that have done a lot of work for 4 months, and now those people are gone. He did stress the 2 reasons that they talked about at the state, Act 46 and AOE reps, Leopold, was that, if there's a resignation from the board, somebody leaves the board, certainly the board has the right to look at making an appointment. Or if, as we said earlier, if somebody's not coming to the meetings.
I think because it wasn't explained, and I heard now that Guilford, Dummerston's doing it, Vernon was planning on doing it, I think it's pretty difficult to say that we don't have that option, we don't have that local control, because we were not aware of that. And I will say, I was not there at the time Matt was elected. I think he's done an excellent job. We said that at our town meeting, but he's also no longer a board member. It was just assumed on my part that we would be reappointing a member of the Vernon board. So that's just my, my perspective, and from what I've heard, you've sought legal counsel, but it's the spirit of thing. It's obviously not a legal counsel like everything else in Act 46. Nobody really knows what's going on, so I'd like the committee to keep that in mind also.
As you'll see from, for example, in our board, we were presented a list of committees, when you reorganize, and I personally knew that it wasn't appropriate to reappoint, but it was not on the list of committees that came through. Who? Go ahead.
Steve Redmond, Guilford. There's a difference between board subcommittees and independently organized committees. The WSESU Finance Committee is a independently organized committee, and we can make changes to who is on that particular committee. We can do that at any time. It is an independent body. I don't see that there's anything different here. What I am concerned about is it seems that in order to have voted something like this, there must be a majority on the Dummerston board who feels that, not necessarily anything personal about Amy, but perhaps she's not representing what the general point of view of the board is. It seems to me that when a board gets a representative to a committee like this, that representative must listen to the general opinion of the board. They're supposed to represent the board, not represent their own desire about what an outcome is. Is that correct?
Well, not in this case, right? The language in the study committee statute's pretty clear about the interaction between the school boards and study committee members.
It doesn't say that. It does say you will elect a representative to the study committee. Is that correct?
I don't know if it exactly says that.
It does say
might, but
the board will.
So I was referring to your point, and I know we're not. I don't like to go back and forth since we
Yeah,
decided
sure.
not to.
Sorry.
But just, I encourage you to review 706 A and B, because it does discuss the relationship after appointment between study committee members and boards. So just something you might want to review.
Presumably, your member listens to your board and represents that general opinion. They don't promote their own opinion in contrast to what the board would want.
See, that might be up for debate.
Well, I would hope that it does, because we do live in a democracy and the board is set up as a democratic institution.
Yeah, I would just recommend reviewing that. But I think we're all hearing the point.
Can I add something Steve
Yeah.
said? I don't think any opinions, pro or con, to Act 46 have been rendered by anybody on this committee. Basically, it's a study of the various alternatives. Throughout this, all I ever heard among the various committee members, Amy included, is that this should be taken to the people in the particular town that the board representatives is here for. They haven't said, yes, I like this, or no, I don't like this. They have simply said, if we try to get all the various alternatives out, that's what we try to present to the people. So ultimately, all I have heard is that the people in the towns are going to try to make the ultimate decision as to whether we go forward with the various plans, or one of the various plans that the study committee has come up with. No opinions rendered.
Ines McGillian from Dummerston. My understanding is that the Dummerston School Board is a sovereign entity that does not take direction from a study committee. My other understanding is that it is legally entitled to appoint its representative to this study committee, and the committee member serves at the board's pleasure. And frankly, I don't think it's clear what this committee's position is. And I don't think it's appropriate to air personal disputes at this committee. And the Dummerston School Board has spoken, and I'm troubled by the uncertainty and the unwillingness to accept a legal decision by a sovereign entity, because this study committee has turned into the Hotel California.
Anyone else? Thanks, everyone.
I have something, but it's probably going to be a little more lengthy. I'm not sure if everybody received the letter that I sent to Christina and to the study committee proposing a collaboration, self-study model versus, did anybody not get this? Because I sent it to everybody. You didn't get it?
What is your name?
Richard Verksted from Dummerston. Feeling a little bit like the wrong guy at the wrong time, I must say, to talk about collaboration. But I think it's an idea that maybe is worthy of consideration. If you don't have it, I have a few copies, but I thought it was sent to everybody on the study committee email.
If you sent it today, chances are good not everyone.
Yesterday. Okay, anyway, so I'm not sure whether I should put presenting this or talk about it a little bit. And I don't want to monopolize your meeting time. I could do it at the end, whatever your wish is.
Well, you have 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you. What got me thinking about this, and I watched all of your meetings, and I've only been to, this is only the second one I've attended actually, but I feel like I know all of your names and faces. And what got me thinking about this particular model was the aspect of self-study wasn't really brought up in any of the meetings I saw, other than if it were to be a town that wanted to go out on its own. And it got me thinking, because I have a soft spot in my heart for local control. I've been in Dummerston for 45 years. I used to teach deaf children at Austin School, and I used to take them to town meeting. I like small towns. I like the way small towns do business. It's been a part of my life, and it may be just an old fart Dummerston talking, but there may be young people who also are interested in protecting that tradition. So that got me thinking. And then the comments about the union being a top-performing union, working well together, I hope, going forward. And it just struck me that maybe there's a way to develop a model, study a model. I know you've done a lot of work because I've seen you at it. And there's a merger that you're trying to sort of get aligned because of time. And maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't, but maybe it'll be voted down, maybe it'll be voted up. I think you need consensus from every town. There's a lot of information that a lot of people don't have, so I'm not sure that's really prudent to do at this point. But if there were a point or a time or a way to study the idea of doing a self-study for the union, showing the state how you're meeting some of these goals, if not all of them. I know there are inequities in the outlying school districts. I've talked to people in the different schools. I know not everything is happening equally in all schools, but if there were a way to show that, show efficiencies. Ron talked about the consolidation of special ed money. That may have been mandated by some law, but it saved money. I'm not really sure how it saved money, but it was an example to me that maybe it could be done through the infrastructure you have with the union. You take $3 or $4 million, or maybe more, $12 million from the local districts to run your school and provide help to these schools. And you have a $27 million budget to begin with. If you were to consolidate all these budgets, you'd be talking $50 million. And doing the rough math, it didn't seem like costs were going to come down. It seemed like for people costs were going to go up. But not to get into that, but just the concept of doing a self-study of the union itself, and is it equipped with enough infrastructure, enough interest for people to share and make these goals come to life through sharing and collaboration, rather than sort of a top-down, this is our super board and you guys are going to do what we say, with maybe 1 or 2 votes from each town. So there's more detail, but I don't have any real answers as to how. You guys know the business better than I, and yet maybe there's a way to go at this a different way, because I think when you have people collaborating with each other, you have people with skin in the game, and teachers already do, and they work hard, but if they feel like they're being asked and consulted and contributing in a way that, I think makes them come to the effort with more energy, more enthusiasm. Collaboration for me works better than hierarchy and bureaucracy.
Thanks.
Quick comment. Dick, I think you'll see tonight when we look at the programmatic and financial review, it kind of follows that line of thinking.
Good.
So, glad you're here.
Charles Fish from Dummerston. I'm familiar with Dick's paper and his argument, and I like it. I think it would go a long way towards satisfying what you know has been my concern and the concern of a lot of other people, which is that local governance, local political participation would be preserved if we could do something along the line that Dick suggests. The difficulty that you've struggled with, and you've all worked hard, there's no question about that, is that you really weren't given enough time from the moment the study committee was formed to consider all of the possible options, right? And you opted to go with one because there was a deadline if one wanted to get the supposed advantage of the tax break. So, but it does mean that people like myself, and I suspect a number of people in Dummerston and maybe other towns, don't really have an equal opportunity to consider other approaches, such as collaboration as opposed to consolidation. It's sort of a structural calendar problem that was imposed upon you. And you have obviously chosen to spend almost all of your time and effort on the accelerated merger. Which means in a way that the towns are deprived, and I know you're talking about forums and trying to get information out there, so, but it does mean that the towns then are handicapped in that they're not going to have an opportunity, probably, to consider Dick's model or some other model, but probably only the accelerated model, unless you vote differently from the way I suspect you're going to vote. So there's a built-in difficulty with it, awkwardness with it, and one might even say unfairness with it, and I don't think that's your fault. But there's just this built-in difficulty. So if you could be open to something like a collaborative approach, which would, one hopes, get the advantages of merger without the full political merger, that would be most welcome to me, and I suspect to a number of people in Dummerston, and maybe some of the other towns as well.
Alice,
Thank you.
Can I just add, there's a recently, as of yesterday, released revision on alternative governance structures, and you've seen this, okay? All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I was out looking to turn off your fan, so I missed.
You did well.
Yes, and we got the doors open. So I think we're okay in here now too for March. It's warm. Can I just see a show of hands where you're all from? I missed that. So Dummerston,
Dummerston?
Guilford, and Vernon. Is there anybody else? Putney. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Anybody from Brattleboro?
We're here.
Just us sitting at the table.
Okay, so we're gonna, thanks. We're gonna talk about some of the articles that would, from the report we've been working on. This is a report that could be used for the accelerated merger, consolidation, or any other, if we were to be a union elementary. So it's not only the accelerated merger, obviously. We're gonna first, and then, so school choice, school closure, board voting representation, and then Frank's got some information for us, a lot of great information, and then, chances, ideally we'll start to flush out self-study as well. So I think, are you gonna talk us through this?
Yeah, I put together a recent revisions to the draft based on previous discussions. There should be one coming down each year, and there's about 10 extra copies that some people may have to share.
Here's my crayon.
And what I'm going to do is follow the agenda boarded items, just kind of walk us through.
Oh, can I interrupt us for a moment? Sorry, Ron, let's do the minutes really quickly. Is that okay, guys? Is there,
I make a motion that we accept the minutes from the previous meeting and the agenda as presented.
is there a second from Brattleboro as well? Any discussion? All those in, no discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No, great, thank you, Amy. Go for it.
Okay, so if you look at page 4, under Article 1. So under Article 1, there's a revision there where it says, originally it was all of our districts were necessary. We included advisable, because at this point, if there are boards that are interested in not going through the accelerated, and when we talked about options, looking at conventional or the modified union board, the MUD, our advice was that you should identify schools either all as advisable, not necessary, or if you get to a point where you know, let's say Vernon is deciding they want to maintain their school choice, so they don't want to be necessary to the merger, they could be advisable, and I'll talk through that as an example of that. So that's just an area that we should pay attention to down the road, the idea of necessary or advisable. And then in the bold, this was warning language that would be part of the town warning article about mergers. In the event a majority of town school districts vote to approve the merger, but one or two districts vote no, a modified unified union school district will be formed pursuant to the provisions of Act 156, 2012. In this case, the MUD will be, the name Wyndham Southeast Union District. I just plugged in a name there. So, and I think the important point about this is it would be the alternative to an accelerated. If it was voted, approved by the towns, the majority of towns, you would still get the incentives, tax incentives, but it would start at 8 cents. It would be 8, 6, 4, 2. So it would be declining that way. Schools that chose, let's say as an example, Vernon decided that they didn't want to be part of the merger, they would still receive grades 7 through 12 a prorated incentive to Vernon because they would be part of the union high school still. So that's an example that they talked to us about. So you'd have actually 3 boards in that case. You'd have a unified union board, you'd have BUHS 6 would maintain a board, and you would have a separate board for a district that chose not to. So in this type of language, based on the number of districts that we have, you could have 2 districts that choose not by their voters, but you could still have a modified union school district.
Is that true even if Brattleboro chose not to?
I don't know based on the numbers. That might be the issue with Brattleboro.
I think if Brattleboro is one of the 2, I think it requires everybody else in order to make the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But would you be able to add at that point any other surrounding towns like Marlboro or Halifax?
Not this year, but in the following years you could, as long as you had the modified union.
And would that MUD follow what articles of agreement? These articles of agreement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't change.
So if we didn't do that formula and instead you just did like a yes or no to the accelerated, then that would take it back to the drawing board.
It delays it for a year.
It delays it for a year, but would this study committee still then exist if it got turned down to then come up with the next best option?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise if you say, well, we're done, let's not do anything, then you face in 2 or 3 years the penalty of.
Right, no, I guess I'm just weighing the option of putting it forward, like kind of both the accelerated and the conventional forward together at the same time, or is there a benefit to keeping them separate so that then you can go back and, continue to work it for another year?
This was under the assumption if you wanted to vote this spring,
Okay.
that there was a fallback position, there was a
Okay.
contingency language. That's what we were trying to look for.
So if we're not doing the accelerated and taking full advantage of that, there's no reason to hold the vote.
Yeah, right, if you weren't going forward with the accelerated.
So a yes or no on the accelerated is preferable really, because why not take the extra time if we have it?
Right.
Or the new board could just potentially make more progress. Could actually make decisions.
Oh, because they would go into effect
They would
earlier.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
and the leadership councils would go into effect. Or we could write that in.
But there'd be no modification of the articles of agreement if you wanted to.
What I would hope is we get to the articles based on the sentiment of the study committee and saying, okay, so how do we shape these articles to make sense going forward? And I think that's what we've been doing all along. This is probably the 5th draft of these articles. Somebody over there, anything you have?
Well, I was just gonna say what Alice said about the fact that my understanding is that if something is voted in as a yes, whether it was the accelerated or this MUD option as the fallback, then at that same election would be the election of the board for this unified district, and then they could start appointing leadership councils, and that work could keep going forward, and what the minutia of the details of all of the merger option stuff could be working, even though it wasn't in full effect for a year.
Yeah, and leadership councils, 3 members of each leadership council are voted on by the citizens of that town.
Exactly.
So that,
Right.
yeah.
So all that would happen at that same vote.
What about, maybe it's later on, but if we have a supervisor union now
Yeah.
with the central office staff, and all of us are paying a certain proportion of that?
Yeah.
What would happen if we had, say, Vernon, Matt, we're picking on Vernon, Walter, I guess, welcome to the table where we often use Vernon as an example. So if we leave Vernon out, that's what Matt loves about it.
That would be upset if we
And then
did.
we have the other group of the elementary schools, and then we saw the BHS board. We would have to have some proportionately different structure for paying for the central office staff and.
No, it'd be the unified union would be assessed, assessment to the unified union.
But we're not all being assessed, it's all one budget.
Well, so that if that was created, you still would have a supervisory union, you would have a new union entity, and you would still have the no votes of whichever town said, no, we don't want to move forward with this. So it would be the same convention that it is now, a proportional enrollment assessment, just like the UHS is part of a union assessment in the supervisory union budget. It would be the same thing, or it'd simply be a larger union. They get the largest share of the supervisory union assessment. It's proportional based on enrollment. Let's say in your example, Vernon was not part of that. They're not part of the union, but they're still part of the supervisory union. And they would get their proportional share as they do today. So it's really not much different in terms of the mechanism of allocating costs to operate districts. We would still be a supervisory union, but we would have a new union that is formed, presumably larger than the one that we have now. But
I guess the reason I'm confused is because if one of the savings that we've talked about was saving on audits and on budget creating and all of that, but it would be asking, again, sorry, Vernon is the one that's out. Vernon would be asking for the staff to prepare a separate budget, a separate audit, and separate contracts or what, all of that, because they're still on their own, whereas the savings that we were talking about would still be happening for the
Yeah, but
rest
it
of
would be 3 instead of 6.
Yeah.
Which is at least cutting it in half, from a savings perspective.
But Vernon is still getting disproportionately more, is my point, to be really blunt, sorry.
Well, I think we might have to ask Frank to run those numbers, if at all possible, in the time allowed. I think that would have to help, we'd have to look at that to consider whether it's feasible.
This is gonna come up when we get to another point as well, so.
Can I ask one more question? So, the BUHS board would stay in existence simply because Vernon didn't join and so the union couldn't be dissolved? Is that, like, why do we still have BUHS if we've all merged?
because that's the nature of a modified union. It's either you become a supervisory district, that's the accelerated model, and there is only one governing board, one entity. If we don't go that way, we are talking about this number of scenarios, but you still have, you don't dissolve the old union. The only thing that dissolves the old union is the accelerated.
Okay.
Would the conventional also dissolve the old union? So that would be.
Well, what did we talk about before then last time? I'm with you, Beth, and
I was pretty sure the conventional does dissolve the union.
Yeah,
we're
but
talking about Vernon being a standalone district and the rest of us all having
I
one.
think what the attorney's saying is, you couldn't go to a conventional this year. You'd have to wait a year to go to the conventional.
But once you
Because
did.
you couldn't put contingency language to do a conventional. You can do it for a modified union.
So does this create issues with the board makeup? So like you,
I'm gonna get to that.
yeah, all right, I'll wait then.
Yeah, good, please, wait for that.
So I'm still confused, though, what?
Well, so
You-
let's
you
continue
can't
and then
do-
we'll,
We can't do what we talked about last time, where it would be everybody but one district standing alone.
It's a convention.
right.
I actually would like to go back to Donna on that, because Donna has a different position.
What
Yeah.
we heard was that,
She says that it could be two separate. So we need to get those two together, and
So I'm not
if we
completely
were to
crazy
send,
at
if we
what
were to
heard.
send that language for her to review for Secretary Holcomb, you know, she would give us feedback on that.
And what you're clarifying is, if we went with 4 districts, that there is actually a independent entity allowed to go its own way without belonging to a supervisory union.
Correct.
And, okay.
so the next section was on page 5. I'm gonna do a brief overview, and then Alice has a document that she wants to speak to, but it's under Article 7. And, well, so under Article 7, it's the school closure issue. So what I did is I took a modification based on discussions that were happening. Unified School District shall not close any schools within its boundaries during the first 5 years of operation. Therefore, an affirmative vote of 3/4 of the full board membership, that was changed from 2/3 to 3/4 of the full membership of the board of directors shall be required to approve the closure of the school. So what's not in there is the veto of individual towns, but the next paragraph is what we originally had. Prior to holding a vote whether a school would close, the board would hold 3 public hearings, and at least one of the public hearings would be in the community which the school is located to be closed. Now, Alice has some more language on this.
Yeah, so Jill and Amy and I got together very briefly and just tried to hammer away at this. Jill, do you want to talk us through it?
Right, I don't know exactly what you were reading, Ron, but.
Article 7 in the
So,
document.
do you have the one that we just sent down?
Yes, that's what I was reading. So the differences are just a little bit.
Yeah.
So we would not close anything for the first 5 years. Thereafter, an affirmative supermajority, 3/4 of the full membership, and the board of directors, we also talked about changing, and I think that comes up a little later. However, during the 5 years, if the municipalities wanted to close, you could request it, and we list out how. Prior to holding a vote, you would hold at least 5 public hearings, and at least 2 of them have to be in the community in which the school is located. A non-binding vote in this community would take place before final consideration of the matter of the board of directors. The outcome of this vote would be given significant weight. If after conducting public hearings and discussing the results of the municipality's vote, the board of directors intend to vote on whether to close the school, it should give public notice of the intent to hold a vote, stating the reason for the closure at least 10 days prior. In the event of the school closure, all school buildings transferred to the unified district will be sold to the municipality where the school closure occurred for $1. It would go back to the town. School closure considerations, and this isn't really substantially or anything different than what we had before, but we never really looked at this, so I would appreciate if we have some comments on it, maybe go through a whole year of study and public discussion before the unified board could vote. During that time, school closures could be reviewed because of major capital investments needed to maintain a building, a school's class size, inabilities to cost effectively deliver equitable services, an inequitable level of opportunities provided to varying student population, or any other that the unified board feels justified to warrant consideration of a closure. The unified board would thoroughly analyze the full impact to the community, financial implications of the change, including the cost savings, the impact on staff in that facility, transportation costs to send current students to another location if applicable. The unified board would weigh the benefits of the school's presence in the community with the gains. The unified board would thoroughly review the equity to be gained in the decision, ensuring that the affected students would gain from the move-in educational opportunities. The public would be advised of the potential change and its review at the very beginning of the year-long process, and no vote could be held until at least one full year. The unified board would hold public forums to describe their analysis process and to hear public comment for, I think we say 5 up above. First would be as the announcement is made, the second at month 4, the third meeting at 8, the final would be held 1 week before the actual town vote. I guess if we do 5, we need to find another time in it. Unified board can decide to discontinue its analysis at any time during this process, but no school change could be made without completion of the entire year-long process and the 4 or 5 public forums. I want to say something out loud here that I think I've mumbled to many people, but when Beth and David and I first looked at the accelerated merger, I mean, one of the things that came out in our discussion when we were comparing accelerated to various other merger types back in December, you know, the obvious fear from Guilford that somehow this merger would mean a closure of a smaller school, particularly Beth brought up Guilford. And one of the discussions that we all had privately, and I guess we haven't really shared so much publicly, is that it was very clear to all of us talking, and any other conversations I've had with people, that there's massive reasons why you shouldn't close, say in Guilford, that might not be so apparent when you first look at just numbers. And that's one of the things that came through my mind while we were writing this, and it's such things as, what's the school size? What else does the school offer? What else could be done with the school? And does it make sense to close something that means so much to a community? Not that I'm looking to close Putney, but Putney has a town, and
We have talked about this.
we have talked about this, and I hope no one takes this and skews it now that I'm suddenly closing Putney. But
They have forest.
they're forest. Mark's still after forest.
The logging, we have.
But Putney has a town. Guilford doesn't have a lot of town, and taking Guilford's school out of Guilford, to me, is a really disastrous thing for that community.
Yeah.
And I really hope and think that I'm not the only Brattleboro taxpayer who could see that. Not just as a union board member, but I believe that the taxpayers would also see that. So when writing this, definitely looking through, you know, what exactly needs to be looked at. And I wanted to make sure that that process was in there. I think it gives a little clarity to townspeople. Maybe someone's lying awake at night worrying about this in Guilford, so at least they have this. But I also think it's really fair, and I feel like smaller towns, or even any of us, need to know what the procedure would be. And I didn't really feel comfortable in saying, leave it to the super board, they'll make a decision. So that's why I went to this exercise of writing, and it really was writing so that you all can discuss it. I have no hard feelings if you want to throw something out or in or whatever.
I think you did a good job. I think it addresses a lot of the concerns. You know, you have to take it with a leap of faith too, because there's not mandating anything happen. It's assuming good faith and that these processes will be followed, but I think at some point you have to take that leap of faith. We did talk about this at our first Guilford forum, and you know, I think the majority of the people there recognized that we wouldn't want to keep a school open if the class size got so small that it wouldn't be a situation where we would be saying, you know, there's only 10 kids in a school, but darn it, we're going to keep our school open. So I think this addresses the town's concerns and also is realistic. So good job.
We're not taking comments right now.
Not even from a Guilford.
No.
Okay.
I really appreciate the time, factor, the idea that one of the things that we've talked about a lot is the way in which this is a process that would take time, and I really appreciate the articulation of that time. You know, I'm thinking about our meeting in Putney, where there is a strong sentiment among the folks that attended that meeting about wanting to have some control over this, and I think what you've offered up gives something to that. I'm not sure this is enough. This is, you know, 4/5 isn't the same thing as giving it back to the town, but I think it goes a long way to articulating what that process would look like, which I think would allay some fears.
Yeah.
I think, Jill, thank you for this, because I think that as a Brattleboro person, I agree with you that none of us want to see the closure of a school, especially someplace where it's the heart of the town is that school. And at the same time, one of the things that's in here is about the unified district selling the building back to the town for $1, which I don't have a problem with that. My only thing that I would want to add to that is that what if after 2 years, the population in the unified district, not necessarily in that town, but in the unified district goes to a point where we need more classroom space.
If we find oil,
Of that unified district, you know what I'm saying?
Building
Is there a
the
way
school.
to buy back the building or lease the building or whatever from the town that's purchased it for $1?
My sense is those discussions would take place during the forums, and you'd anticipate that, the fact that, it's like what we, I think in Brattleboro, when Canal Street was being considered closed, the alternative was, well, we're gonna create an early ed center there. And if Canal Street closed now, because we're thinking about having early ed Head Start classrooms in school sites, which seem to be more effective for students, then so what do we do with Canal Street? Well, we wouldn't just close it down, we'd maintain it for purposes and decide, you know, do we need it for a school or do we need it for office space? I think those discussions would be very clear.
I just didn't want that to be left alone, because even though one town's population may drop to a point where a school's not necessarily in that community, or one of the schools in Brattleboro is not necessarily, doesn't mean it's not gonna change in a year or 2 years if something positive happens, and maybe I'm being Pollyannish about that, but let's be optimistic, you know?
Well, we could certainly address that
Yeah,
in
okay,
language.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
I think another factor in this language is when we look at the voting representation, and we can come back to this discussion, but just for a purpose of tying it into this decision, on page 6, the Unified School District Board representation. This is different than the original where we had 9 board members, 5 from Brattleboro and 1 from each outlying town. This is again that hybrid model with at-large members. So you have, you can read the paragraph, but essentially.
This is the one I touched base on last time, so the old version is not in here right now.
Right, so this is the hybrid.
and this is the one that Chris Leopold had suggested and said that it meets the representation requirement.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted.
So, you know, you can see Brattleboro has 2, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, Vernon 1, and then there's 2 at-large that could be voted through the whole Union District. Could be 2 from Dummerston, could be 2 from Brattleboro, you know, whoever runs has a chance to be elected, for a total of 8. So when considering the previous language on school closure, it balances out the numbers quite nicely. And then if you have, is it 3/4 majority? So that's a super majority, you know. There's a lot of protection in this.
And why do we not want 9 in case of ties?
That's what I thought too. But we stuck with 8. And let me just point out the next bold paragraph. Because when I talked to Chris, I said, okay, so if Vernon or another town decided to be out, how does it change these numbers? He said it doesn't. And you can read this next bold print. For non-member districts, will have voting power for all general union district actions, including secondary students. So Vernon is, as an example, we talked about the unified district. Vernon would not be part of that, but they would have voting representation for grades 7 through 12. But they would recuse themselves from votes on elementary school issues because they're a separate elementary district. So this kind of takes care of that. Where, again, if you have two members, districts that chose to go alone, they don't give up their right as a voting member for the union district that includes their students that are going to the high school.
But what we talked about earlier is that if we had a unified district, say it was 4 of the 5 towns, but then the 5 towns would be part of the BUHS district, so that wouldn't actually work, would it? Because we're keeping with Vernon, if Vernon was not on the unified district, they would still have a vote, but there wouldn't be anything related to the high school going to the unified district because there'd be the BUHS number 6 district would still be in place. And they would have a representative to that board, wouldn't they?
Well, this is what he explained to me.
That's how I.
This goes back to the issue that Donna said something different, so that if we're interested in exploring this, you should suggest that I take this, Ron and I take this back for confirmation.
Yeah, because from what we were talking about just earlier, about if one town wanted out and we went with the modified district, then we would end up with 3 boards all within the WSESU, that town that wanted out, the high school, and then the unified district. So that would negate, I would think, and maybe we need to see clarification, but that would negate this, and that town that wanted out would not have, it would have 7 members on this unified board.
A little clarification on that, which it still needs Alice to review, but it would be not the BUHS board, but it would be what the BUHS union gets expanded to.
Right.
So that is a board. You have the towns that didn't vote to join, that they are one or how many separate boards, and then you have a supervisory union board. So that would be the 3 boards, but not an independent UHS board. That's what.
That's what I meant.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a modified.
But I'm just saying that if we had that system, then somebody recusing themselves from a vote related to elementary school, having somebody go to those board meetings doesn't seem like it would make any sense because they wouldn't have anything to say.
There's more to it than that though too, Ricky, because this would play in like the finance committee, because if a town votes no, but they're still getting services from the new district for like special ed and all those things, they would still have a say for that sort of stuff. So it does make sense in that regard. It would like take the effect of like what the finance committee does now.
So that's what you were saying, that they would recuse themselves from the votes that don't make sense for them to vote on?
Right. Yep.
Okay.
So their grades that are independent.
But if you're still
It goes with the name mud.
You're getting the bills.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, you're working really quick.
You're definitely getting an assessment.
So one more question on the at-large. Who votes for the at-large? Just
whole-
the people in the town?
All towns.
And who votes for the people in Brattleboro?
Just below Brattleboro.
Nope,
That's the question.
everyone. Our at-large is at-large.
Yeah, and they would have to be 2 Brattleboro reps.
Right, but the 2 Brattleboro reps would be voted on only by the people in the town of Brattleboro.
No,
No?
no, that is not my
All 5
understanding.
towns would vote on all of those people. On all 8 of those
Yeah,
seats.
so he gave us 2 different models. I believe that is true, yes. Yes.
So that really does
All of them.
attend to the issue that people had of Brattleboro controlling
Yes.
something because you're actually voting for the membership of the entire board.
Yeah, I think this is a huge change.
So the member would have to come from that town,
Yeah.
Yes.
but all the towns vote for.
All the members.
Everybody.
All the members.
So, all the towns
It's all-
vote for the Putney, yeah. Go ahead, Christina.
Does the Putney rep have to be from Putney?
Yes.
I don't see that language here. It says the 2 Brattleboro reps have to be residents of Brattleboro.
Yeah.
And then it says and I've read another, I think Cornwall did this, and there's no guarantee, they said so Jill could be our Dummerston rep if she ran.
That would be
And,
fun.
and Kim could be the Putney rep, and Ricky, you can have Vernon.
So you're suggesting we just adjust?
Well, I think that you can't if it's at large,
Well,
with my understanding.
think
I don't
that
know, I
next
think that needs to be
sentence-
clarified.
That next sentence where it says 1 school director is designated for each of the following communities, Dummerston, Guilford.
Designated for.
So we will confirm that would be the same as the Brattleboro, 2 coming from Brattleboro, and the 1 each coming from the identified towns.
I think it just needs to have the same wording for all
Yeah.
the
Where it says
towns.
eligible
Yeah.
residents, put that in front of Dummerston, Guilford, Putney, and Vernon.
Yeah, so we'll confirm that, Christina.
Yeah.
Good catch.
So if somebody wants to run and takes out their papers from their town clerk and they need 20 signatures or whatnot, all the signatures have to come from Putney or Vernon? Or?
Yes, that is, we can double check that, but that's my understanding.
Why?
Chat with them.
Why would you do that though? If everybody's gonna vote on you, anybody can put you on the petition. Anybody can sign your petition.
Should we do it at work instead of?
We'll double check, but I think it is for the town.
So we'll clarify that. We
Okay, great.
continue going down this agenda
Yeah.
because of the time, we do want to get to the financial program review. Frank has a document and we also have something
Can
on the
I
screen.
ask one more thing on the school governance? So everybody else is fine with 8, nobody else thinks that an uneven number is better? Doesn't matter to anybody? I don't feel real strongly about it, I just envision that you see 4 and 4 impacting.
What would you do if that had
You'd have to have another at-large. I mean, to get to 9.
No, but I mean, if we kept it at eight,
At 8, what do you
how
do
do you
with the
resolve
vote?
a tie?
Draw a rock.
That's enough time.
What is the rationale?
In Robert's rules, isn't a tie the same as a no?
What?
Is that what it
In
is?
Robert's rules, a tie is the same as a no.
She's gonna bring up her Robert's rules.
You can move on
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'll see what Ryan's rules says.
All right. So we're gonna delve into finance.
I had a
Yeah,
question. What
go
is the rationale for the 8? Why is that even there? Why is it 8?
I think it comes, it's from the history of having done it before. This was a hybrid model that has happened in other towns, and so that was the model.
So it's not an analysis of the population numbers, it's just what someone else did.
Yeah, it's been accepted before in the state of Vermont. I can get his citations for you.
Since we're in the formulation stages and the numbers, I agree with Ryan. That 9 is a nice number, let's put it in now and just make it another at-large number.
Yeah.
No big
And then
deal.
for proportionality of the,
Yeah.
does that dilute Brattleboro then?
It does.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that.
Why not?
It would dilute Brattleboro's representation.
But this already does that based on.
I know, like, I don't know,
Based
I don't
on our
know.
population anyway.
I don't know.
And it
That's
wouldn't
Chris Lee said.
because
I think
our
he said,
standard-
we could go to 9. What you have to decide is, do you want 3 from Brattleboro or 3 at large?
3 at large.
3 at large.
3 at large came to the spirit
I know,
of
that's what he means.
cooperation more than 3.
We're all about cooperation
We're all
tonight,
about
guys.
cooperation.
We're going. 3 at large. Let's do it.
Why don't we ask you for the benefits of both? Yeah. Okay. All right, do we need to move?
Yeah, from the screen.
Can it make it go any bigger, Frank?
Yeah.
Ron, do you want me to start, or you want to do an overview of?
Well, looking at the Picus report and thinking about our own district, I think one of the things that we've been looking at is program descriptions early on in terms of the different staffing that we've had in each of the schools. And that's caused us to think about some of the inequities that we've had. And so then we looked at program expansion and how we could kind of share the resources to spread them around to various schools at a efficient cost. So the next step was to look at the overall staff, just as we did with the special ed consolidation, thinking about how we share the resources, how we change the student to teacher ratio. And that's what Frank has here. And so he's going to point out things like regular education, the elective classes or specials. We'll be looking at instructional academic support, guidance counselors, library media, all the different categories. And I'm going to have Frank explain how he looked at certain numbers that were identified as the Vermont legislative study recommendations through the PICUS report as it compares to our own numbers.
Okay, so you have a handout. I know the overview is a little hard to see. So your handout is the same as what you're looking at on the screen. It just helps, I can do the pointing so that you can see the document. So we've seen some of these statistics earlier, just to revisit. So much of the PICUS study is centered around school size, and here's our enrollment in this first block of data. And we've identified it by grade level. So, you know, Brattleboro Union High, Brattleboro Town Elementary, Dummerston, Guilford, and so on. And there's our census data that was used to establish the 2000 FY16 budgets, which data would have been November 2014. Okay, those are the censuses collected at that time. So, you know, what you see here, no news to you individually, but maybe as a group, you may not have realized if you hadn't looked at this earlier. I did send this out, I think it was the January meeting. But you know how similar Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney are in the K-6. This is not including pre-K because we are quite inconsistent in the way in which we're organized to provide the pre-K. But very similar for those three districts, and then you see Brattleboro's the larger elementary, of course, and Vernon a little bit larger than Dummerston, Guilford, Putney. At the middle school, you know, same thing in that we have a lot of similarity, and then we have the high school, obviously primarily at VUHS, but Vernon has some folks both at the middle school and at the high school level that are not at VUHS. So these 58 students are at other schools. But some of Vernon's students are over here at DAMS as well as at the high school. So if you just sort of capture these numbers as a reference point, you'll see we'll be using them quite a bit in this document. The purpose of this, of course, is not to say, well, the PICUS report is a prescriptive a path for us that we must get to. It simply illustrates from the researchers' experience systems that have used the student-teacher ratios that they recommend to meet state board expected outcomes for academic programs. And this is both classroom instruction and student support as well as administration. So we'll give you an overview, and then I'm sure you might have questions, so we'll see if we can answer them. So as a snapshot, we've got our enrollment, our current enrollment, and then our current staffing. So here's our staffing. This is a summary of our staffing by district. About 70 classroom instructors at the high school. You know, for example, 7 in Guilford. So for the high school, this is grades 7 through 12, which includes the Career Center. You know, in Guilford, this is just K through 6. Dummerston and Putney, K through 8. Vernon, K through 6. Brattleboro, K through 6. So this first block just tells us in total, you know, Brattleboro has certified folks working with students, 100 for the high school, and so on. The first, and then when we do our own ratio, it's a simple calculation of our, for just classroom, our 69 teachers, student-teacher ratio, so students divided by teachers, we have an average of 16 students per teacher at the high school. This is just the high school classroom instructor, okay? And initially you see that we're pretty in line with the PICUS study for our classroom teachers. These ratios, there is a bit of a difference here in Putney, you see, and in Vernon, but overall, not a dramatic departure. However, even though these numbers are relatively small, when we do the math, and this is where I wouldn't say a main, but a significant reason why the legislature has asked for an analysis of what has been proven to be possible in terms of staffing ratios and good results. Even though we have relatively small variances in this example, you know, where I say, you know, the difference here, they're recommending 17.2 in Dummerston, and you see here, and I'm sorry, we're at 17.2 and they're recommending 17.7. When we do the simple math, it says, okay, well, what's the implication for employment at Dummerston in this situation? Well, the math would be, we take our 155 students up here in Dummerston, and we divide it by the recommendation of 17.7 average, and it says that math would mean we should have 8.8 teachers. Here's our number, in fact, we're at 9. Okay, and there's the difference. Not a big, you know, not a big difference. It says we're overstaffed by 2/10, and it's unlikely that we would make that change in a unified system given that small variance. But over here at the high school, even though we've seen, you know, appears to be relatively close, you know, at the high school when you do the math of taking 18.6 recommended student-teacher ratio and you divide that into our 1,115 students, it says our staff ought to be 60. And you saw that number earlier, 69.8. It says, well, maybe we could do the same program as other high schools have done with, in this example, 9 fewer classroom teachers.
And an example of that is in the BUHS budget this year, we cut $200,000 primarily from Career Center classes we needed to reduce because the class sizes being so low. We cut an administrator, and we cut some middle school and high school staff proportion to those kind of numbers. So that's something that we do anyway, but I mean, this highlights that right across the district. It's some cases easier to do at a large school because you still have those programs. We didn't affect any programs or offerings because there was still opportunities for students. When you get across the board, it's a little bit more difficult.
Right, and it's important to not take this, any one group of our people and what they do in a singular context. Because the PICUS report is based on a integrated educational system. It's not useful to say, well, let's just look at this subgroup and forget everybody else, because from their point of view as a system, and of course as you know, board members and our administrators know, our teachers know, that our classroom teachers are supported by our academic support teachers and our elective teachers and certainly our administration, and so we have to look at this as a cohesive organization. So you're gonna see some fairly significant variances as we go through, knowing that some of what appears to be overstaffing may be offset by what appears to be understaffing in other areas. But when we're finished with this, we'll see how it sort of, what implications it might have in total. Our next group here, we have our elective teachers. So if you read the FICRIS report, you would see in the Exhibit 3, that section of the report, these descriptions here. They're basing it, their recommendation on what they have seen in successful schools. For the classroom teacher, it was one teacher for every 17 students at the high school level, 1 per 20, reduced to 18.6, as you see right there, because we're running the Career Center. For our elective teachers, this is our art, phys ed, music, foreign language, technical instruction, driver's ed at the high school. Their recommendation is right here, 20% of what they recommend for the core teachers. So it's just 20% of these numbers. So when we do the math, we see how we look compared to, actually for high school it's 33%. I was doing the math in my head and I know 20% of 60 is not 20, so that is 33% for the high school. So you see the descriptor there, that's what they're seeing, knowing that you need more activity, more support because of the types of electives at the high school level. So here you see their recommendation is the 20, 8.7 for Brattleboro Elementary. You see this is what we employ. So Brattleboro Elementary appears here that we're understaffed in our classroom teacher, where they're recommending 43.5 positions and we employ 42, and this suggests that we're understaffed here in Brattleboro Elementary, and we're exactly staffed according to their recommendation in our elective classes. Overstaffed at the high school and very closely staffed aligned with the recommendation in 3 of our schools, a bit of a variance in Putney and Vernon. So moving through this, the next category, a pretty...
So Frank,
Yep.
can you move it over to the totals?
Yep.
At least just for these 2 categories.
Yep, here's the totals.
So we're looking at 10.9 classroom teachers, and then 8.5 elective teachers.
Right.
Essentially overstaffed, I would argue that that's not quite true to say overstaffed, but in terms of those numbers, that's what that represents. The next category is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so the next category, it's instructional coaches, core tutors, our substitutes, academic support. In some instances, those might be familiar titles in your schools, in others they may not. So these are standard sorts of resources that are known to really improve instruction. In particular, the study notes that the instructional coach is probably some of the most effective results in terms of a school system's investment in having an impact on student learning. So their recommendation are these first numbers, and there are a lot of specifications in terms of the number of professional people that should be associated with a certain number of students. That is in the PICUS. It's too much detail to write out here, but there it is, table 3.1, page 11 of the study, if you wanted to see that. So you see here is where we are starting to see a fair amount of deviation from their recommendation. Remember, we were overstaffed, parenthetically, at the high school in classroom instruction, but here you see substantially understaffed. So this is where we were saying you gotta look at the whole picture. You can't take parts and pieces. So just doing a quick scroll, or if you looked at page 1 versus page 2, page 1 for the high school says overstaffed by 9.7. A negative meaning those would be reductions at some, if we move toward this, and a positive number on the variances, these are more people we need to hire. So at a glance, those two numbers kind of cancel each other out. But here, just having reviewed this, you see Brattleboro Elementary now says, okay, well, the other two were right on the PICUS recommendation, but here we're a little over. And we have the same thing over here where Guilford, this is a recommendation where we have more academic support at Guilford, more at Putney, and more at Vernon. And again, scrolling over here in total, they're recommending 50 people, we have 41, and they're saying if you were a unified system, they would see 9 additional positions as being an effective investment for getting great results. Their recommendations are adjusted for poverty, so that's why we have these numbers here, and you can see that there is quite a variation in our poverty statistic.
So this is, Dick, this is kind of a self-study. This forces us to look at these programs and staffing, and so it makes us think, okay, so we ought to be making some adjustments based on staffing of these categories.
So, Ron, did we want to talk about our paraeducators here? Or
Yeah, the next category would have been paraeducators. We didn't put it in. Quite frankly, the PICUS numbers, we're going to get to that. And it essentially shows that we're really overstaffed in paras. And I think that's true in Vermont anyway, but that's just the culture of our schools. So we didn't put it in this document. We will follow up with that. And so, it might be where we're overstaffed in paraeducators, but understaffed in the category that we just went over.
So extended day and summer programs, the PICUS report sees that as a very important investment. They have their recommendation of at least 2 teachers for every 120 students that are at risk, or in poverty, and are English language learners. So here's our activity. Brattleboro Union has an after-school program and a summer program. Brattleboro Town has a program. You see, we're staffed, very closely to this. I wasn't able to get the detail from Putney, but I know they have a program. I'm not aware of a regular program in Dummerston, Guilford, and Vernon. So those are just not included at this point. But if we find that there either will be or there has been, we can add that.
For example, Guilford just added some money through a grant and some other staffing or other resources to do that, so we can include that in this updated version.
So for our English language learners, we have 40 students in the 3 schools, but I think most of them are at Academy. And our PICUS report is recommending 4 teachers for every 125 students. Here, it appears that we're overstaffed a little bit in that group, but again, when you only have 1 student over here in Vernon, it's just hard. I'm 1 student here in Dummerston. It's hard to get an efficient model for staff. Brattleboro Town has been able to make sure that the core group is at Academy, and that's a way to manage an efficient use of staff.
Frank, is that, you just said Vernon has one, it
10.
says 14 ESL students here?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it was Putney that has one. Yeah, it's, Vernon has 14. Yeah.
So there's an example in my mind of really a way a unified district could better utilize staffing to get these numbers in line.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you got 14 students in Vernon with the staff associated with that. And you've got one in Dummerston with a percentage of staff. Then you have 40 in Brattleboro Town. And so in some cases, like with the Brattleboro Town school system, we have consciously decided that the ESL students would be in one building to maximize staffing. And so I think there's, Andy, 37 languages that the students know. And so the fact that we have those students in one site, we can keep the staff there and maximize the resources, as opposed to, at one point, we had them spread out all over the place, and you just, you know, it's very difficult to staff it in an efficient way.
I guess the clarification I was looking for is all of these are saying that we have too many, according to the recommendation, right? Am I reading that correctly?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's why I'm trying to
look
figure
at
out.
Vernon is higher as compared to
Okay.
.2 and .3.
Sure.
Yeah.
So how would being unified help that, I guess, is my question.
Looking at maximizing the staffing related to the number of students that are needed.
So would you like bus students from those towns like to Academy if this is gonna be the ESL school?
I don't know if I'd do that. Maybe one of the outlying schools would serve in that purpose.
Like where you have Dummerston and Putney, if they both had one.
Yeah.
Has them in the same course.
I guess if Vernon has too many more than the rest of the towns, you'd take from Vernon and give it to the other towns, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't that be a changing demographic on a yearly basis?
It could, yeah.
So it's not necessarily pinned down to what's here, it's going to change
Sure.
year by year.
So on our, so those are our instructional teachers, our certified, instructors, and then the report moves into the student support services. So here we have counseling, and I know Ron has mentioned that the region, the Wyndham Southeast, has made a concerted effort in counseling, guidance services to students, and that's reflected here, where with our small numbers, this 300 students per counselor at the K-5 level, just falls below what's considered feasible in our separate systems. In total, these little variances add up to 3 positions. And it's similar with our nursing services, where they're seeing systems that are able to respond to student needs with 1 nurse per 500 students. And I know we all have a lot of challenges in this area about meeting student needs.
So we've made a conscious decision in nursing, and guidance for that, to that extent as well, but for nursing, we've decided to use the Medicaid funding to supplement the staffing for nursing. So, based on the PICUS report, we're way over in all schools, but quite frankly, I think the benefit that we get using the federal money, it's not a big burden on the local districts, but it certainly gives you the staffing that you really need in a rural, small school, where you can't just send the kid to an emergency room or that sort of, so that's been intentional. And I think those are the things that just straight numbers don't really clarify.
Jill?
Just wanted to comment that the Vegas report, Frank and I were actually a part of a feedback day. The fellows that put it together, well, the group that put it together came around and had at least 2 throughout the state of Vermont, and they invited specific people from school boards, principals, staff, financial, business managers. And Frank and I happened to be up in Bellows Falls for one day in November, and sat in on this. And when we got to this part, we would actually look even more overstaffed had they not listened to the feedback from everyone that sat in the room. And it was appallingly shocking how the stories that we heard from other areas of what the nurses were doing and the level of babies born addicted to opiates in different towns, and what we're asking our staff to do in the state of Vermont. It was not just a Brattleboro thing by any means. It was basically southern Vermont that was at our meeting, and then there was another one in the north. And so he did adjust that. The man that was here is a retired professor from the Picus Fellows, retired professor from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And at that point, when he started to hear all these stories, you could just see his face, and I remember thinking, you know, or maybe said out loud, "Welcome to bucolic Vermont." I mean, that it was not what he expected to hear at all. And so those numbers are actually adjusted, at least he said he was going to,
Yeah, they
adjusted up so that we could have more nurses and counselors than what he recommended in the other places that he'd been to, which were somewhat like us in the whole state of Wyoming. I think he'd been over in Maine, down in Maryland, and Chicago, and LA or something. I think so.
I think they've done nearly 20 of these studies for legislatures because of the concerns that, similar concerns, the lack of equity among schools and high costs.
So that number, that 0.3 for all the small schools, like is 0.4 for Vernon, that's an adjusted up number. So that's 30% of a nurse, one
Off
day
the
a
top
week.
of my head, do you remember, Frank, you wanted to do
I
like,
think it was 750.
right, 1 nurse per 750 kids, and we died.
Yeah.
Everybody in the room was like,
That would
flabbergasted.
that would go back to the days of Miss Driscoll, who used to do 3 schools.
Yeah.
And
we consciously don't want to do that.
Yeah, and the reality is, it's the acuity of care that we are given to our students. We're the extended family, and the nurse is really a key part of that.
I'm not
There
sure.
was one town that said that they basically have the receptionist doing everything.
Yeah, it's the way it used to be.
And that was scary for the receptionist, but what they had happening.
So moving along, our library media specialist, looks like we're very close to being in line with the FICUS recommendation. They're suggesting 1 for every 300 students. So there's our comparison. We're the second line, and the variance is the difference. That's based on the student counts again. And then our administration, here we are with their recommendation. It's based on 1 principal for 357 students in an elementary school, 450, 1 principal for 450 in a middle school, and 1 principal and 1 assistant for every 600 students in a high school. So basically, there was no recommendation to do a partial principal, even though we're well under these numbers. They recognize, of course, the importance of the leadership at the building.
So don't mess with that.
It's interesting
Well, as I
that
said,
the principal can stay at 1, but the nurse can be cut down to 0.3.
Yeah.
I mean,
But we wouldn't.
do they take into account that if you have 500 in 2 or 3
yeah,
locations?
that's true.
But I mean, that's the way
Yeah,
they
that's their
study.
standard, that's right, true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, as an example, we did reduce 1 administrator at BUHS this year. I think the Career Center, because you have a director, skews those numbers because, you've got 50 some odd sending school students, but there's a number of students, a large number of students from BUHS that are in the Career Center. So proportionally, that number is gonna be very low. And then I think, as we all know, small schools, you can't operate a school with a half-time principal or a 0.3 principal. And the work is just pretty daunting. So,
Another point he made while he was talking to Frank and I is that his normal study would have had the smallest school being something like 700 or
yeah.
Well, for a high school, it was 600, and the elementary, I think it was 300.
But he was asked to adjust for Vermont.
Yeah.
And so he had come up, I mean, these numbers have taken into account Vermont's different rural nature and difference from LA.
Yeah.
So in summary, again, this is only for an illustration. It's not an intended target. But for this group of services in employment in a school, if we just took an average salary and benefit package of $85,000 and we applied it to the totals here, just adding those groups up, they're recommending 116 people. We're employing 124 for BUHS, and that's a variance of 7. That's 600,000. And moving that across to all of our systems, you see this is a illustration of, from the PICA study, a unified system being able to deliver the expected outcomes of communities in the State Board of Education. That you see a variance here of 3%. As Ron mentioned, we haven't brought in the paraeducators. We haven't discussed the other elements of the budget, which facility management and which is a big part of our budgets. We've set aside special ed because we are already making good progress in a better service at a flatter cost curve.
So as an example, there's the student-to-teacher ratios that we're looking at here. And clearly, there are some categories that would cause us to think, okay, so we should pare back some staffing. With the special ed, going from 1 teacher to every 7.5 students to 1 teacher to every 12 students, it really dropped or raised the student-to-teacher ratio, and it allowed us to, save $300,000. I think, as I've said many times, it's really, I feel, better services because the behavioral interventionists are now shared more than they were in the past. We're training our para-technicians, para-educators as behavioral technicians. The SU is assuming the cost for that, as opposed to local budgets that probably couldn't afford that. So I think the services are better and the costs are more efficient. So,
as far as folks that have been asking for a unified budget, or what would it look like if we move together, this is the core of what a budget assumption would consider. As you know, we're 60% staff costs, salary and related benefits. So this begins to outline what a unified system might look like, and it can be pulled apart and applied to different configurations that we've been talking about.
This data is excellent. I'm really happy to see it. Thank you, Frank, for doing it. It's a ton of work. The report itself is hard to get through. A couple points. One's a question. The bottom line here on page 3, where it adds up the total number per district that should be added or subtracted, and then there's a financial number put to it. I hope that, this is the first step, I hope, looking at this.
Yeah,
and so one of the points would be, well, if we've made a decision, for example, I'll look at Dummerston just because that's my lens, and I don't want to pick on Vernon.
They're used to it.
Yeah. If we're supposed to, if according to the report, we should have 2.6 less staff, but we made a decision not to, or to staff higher for the nurse, like we just talked about. Wouldn't a more appropriate number be the 1.9? subtract that 0.7, because in other words, if we're making a decision
Yeah.
to do that, we,
In the counseling decision recently,
Yeah,
is
so-
another example of that.
so maybe in the
That's
next-
what we would factor in.
yeah, so maybe the next step, that would show that. So that's my first point. And the second point is, and I'm sure you're going this direction, but will there be performance to correlate to this? In other words, if a school does really well, is in the top 10 in the state, for example, but pays 6.7% more than the PICUS report suggests, and that's an average, and someone that's in the top 10 is an average, to me, it's all based on money in, results out, so I was hoping that there'd be some data to go with that.
We have the data, and
Yeah.
this is the issue of equity. So if you look at, and I probably have it buried in this thing somewhere, if you look at the first program description that we put together on a spreadsheet, we have the latest 2 years of the NECAP data and the SBAC data. And it's really interesting to me that some of the schools that are pretty overstaffed have very poor results. And it's not just based on free and reduced lunch or poverty. And so we have that information.
So it would be good, so that'll be
Tied
coming,
together.
we'll be able to tie this together. Great, thank you.
So what it says to me is, we gotta use staff differently. And we gotta use practices differently that other schools have maximized those resources. Academy School and Oak Grove were cited in the PICUS report. They have high poverty rates, they have outstanding student achievement. Their staffing is more than adequate, but, we have to look at how they're staffed as opposed to some of the other schools with less poverty and not as good results.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'll give you 2 examples. At Dummerston and the SBACs last fall, I went through days of analysis, like Frank does. I had to go and pull this off the AOE. Based on the number of top 10 finishes for all the classes in Dummerston, there were only 2 schools in the state that performed better than Dummerston. Putney, there were only 7 schools that performed better than Putney in the state. So there's two examples of how, and I'm happy to share it with you. You're not going to find it anywhere because I had to prepare it myself based on, like I said, the data on the website. But it's an example, again, on the other side of that spectrum. But I agree with you. Individual schools need to be looked at and for one reason, and other schools need to be looked at for another reason. But it's to be able to look at performance versus inputs, I think, is a great thing to do. So I'm encouraged that you'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amount of work.
So Lyle
Yeah.
and Ron, of course, they did most of the work.
Yeah.
Can I just say,
And then Ian?
and yes, this is awesome, it's really great to see that we're not gonna have to lose our nurse especially. But one question is, it's a little difficult because you can't move a BUHS is a consolidated school already, and you can't readily move a high school teacher to an elementary school. So it's a little tricky when you talk about moving staff around, when you're including it's just a little tricky thinking about it.
Well, what we've just done over the last few years, including just a month ago or 2 months ago, is looking at staff between the middle school and high school and making some reductions and making some shifts. So we can do that. There are shifts between special ed at the Career Center in the high school and middle school. So that is a unified district that we, it's trickier, but we're able to do that. And as I said, we needed to cut $200,000, and I think we did it without affecting any program. We gave up no program where kids would not have access to the opportunities that they've had in the past. So that's an example of that you can do it.
But I'm seeing both places overstaffed here, so it's just, it's a logistical, you can't just say 1 point, there may be some of that, but it's a little tricky. It's something to keep in mind in terms of the numbers.
Okay, guys. One more, Ian, sorry.
Well, equity is a key part of Act 46. And especially if we're looking at the self-study option, these numbers are very important because it really doesn't matter for the equity point in spending whether we are meeting the PICUS numbers or not, but it does matter whether our schools are in the same ratio on them, overstaffed or understaffed. So we see in this there are categories where we have schools that are understaffed and schools that are overstaffed. part of the self-study would have to be trying to bring those into the same ratio. We could all be overstaffed by 10% and that'd be fine, that'd be equity. But we can't have one school understaffed and one school overstaffed and think that we're gonna be successful in a self-study.
Okay, guys, it's 8 o'clock. If we need to talk about the schedule, and we need to decide whether we want to run late for public comments. But let's first talk about the schedule, is that all right? If we, at some point in the next few weeks, we'll determine whether we are gonna go ahead with the accelerated merger. If we were to do that, we would be shooting for a May 17th State Board of Education meeting, which means at the very start of May, the first week, the report would have to be finalized and go up to Donna Russo-Savage to look at with Secretary Holcomb. So we need to back that out of it. But I just wanted to, and so I will come up with we have a calendar that Amy created for us, which was great. I think what I can do for us, if it makes sense, is to take these dates and put them in a different kind of chart, so we know the specific timeframe. Does that work? So,
Can we talk about community forums and
So,
that would work?
yeah, so what schools tend to do, and of course, every unification process or consideration is unique, but what has been a tendency to happen is for most of the serious sort of in-depth forums to happen after approval. So that very often, as I know from my own, for example, in Putney, there's a lot to talk about, but there's nothing set. So you're not really you're discussing philosophy and not practical considerations. So that, I think, is why, for the most part, most forums happen after the report has been approved.
And once it's approved, Alice, do we not get to change it?
Correct. Well, so I know you can change it, I believe, if we are all there in the room, things can be changed, but not to a grand extent. I can't, if we go ahead with this, we can get that language, confirmation as to what that would be.
Between the time of when you submit the report and then there's review and back and forth, apparently there's a lot of back and forth through emails.
Right, but when you're actually, when you actually finalize the report and send it up in early May, that's when that's with a week, within a couple of days of sending it. At that point, it goes to the State Board of Ed, so it's in early May that we would have to be done.
So once we have our if we were to approve an accelerated merger, send it up to the State Board of Ed, and the State Board of Ed approved it, at that point, if we did public forums, we could not make changes to the articles of agreement.
It would be a done deal.
Yes.
Is that what we're saying?
Then the report would be up to the consideration of the voters, and that's what has tended to happen around the state.
So we want
I mean, there are certainly
forums.
forums, towns and study committees can have discussions in forums ahead of time.
That's what Guilford's doing.
Yeah, but that's when you really sit down. One might imagine that we would do, as other committees have done, is sit down with the report in hand and go over line, article by article with voters in each town. So we would have our 2 Guilford forums and so on. And then people would, do our best to educate folks so that when they vote, they know what they're voting on. So that's what tends to happen.
I'm hopeful for Brattleboro that we would have a chance to have community input before the final language. I guess I'm hoping that we come to fairly clear language and then go out to the voters and see what they're thinking. Before we make an actual decision, I guess, even if we're for sure going forward with that, but to get some.
If we had a copy of what we were gonna present, I think it would be much more palatable. Yeah, I mean, this
So-
is, but,
Right, so if we were to do this, so we meet with Rebecca Holcomb next week, and then there's a meeting on the 22nd, we could have a pretty firm document, with language that needs to be tweaked and, made pretty, by the end of that meeting, perhaps, and then we could release it to our boards, because, we need to, each town needs to, school board needs to look at it, review it, understand it, and then share with their reps, and then the reps will come back and share with this group, and then this group considers, reflects, rewrites if necessary, and then determines from there on whether to move forward with asking the Board of Ed. And so there can be community forums at the same time as school board discussions are happening. It's up to this group.
So if we were to do that, what would the deadlines look like then? What month are we having community forums in? April?
April.
And then that would give us, by the end of April, we would have time, so if we did forums for 2 weeks solid, basically trying to get to all the towns, and then by the middle of April, probably April break, right? But after that April break, we would be able to say, this is the final report, we come back together, and this is what everybody has heard for feedback, and then we make a decision, okay, then at that point, are we going forward?
Right, and so we would write it and share it probably with Secretary Holcomb's office to review language, to make sure that we've dotted all our i's, and that it's legal and appropriate according to them, that it's acceptable.
Is it possible to do some of that before the forums? Because if there's something substantial that would need to be changed by them, it would be nice to have that, to know that before it went to forum.
Right, so we've started that process a little bit, just sort of exploratory language, and then, yes, so we would intensify that over the next couple of weeks.
So Guilford has a forum scheduled for March 21st already.
Would you like us to be there, or do you want to just do that?
You're very welcome to come.
Okay.
Would we have it done by March 21st?
No.
but we have a good basis to start with
Yeah, I
what we
think
have.
Yeah, I mean, you could share what, this
Right.
is a
It's a
public
sharing,
document.
it's a sharing.
Yeah, we would have copies of this available and discuss.
Open forum listening and.
Okay. So can we make a couple more meetings, just since, I mean, we're running late, but can we at least make 2 more? March 22nd?
That's in Dummerston.
So so the 17th is in Putney, the 22nd is in Dummerston. Where we do next?
Vernon would be the next one, and we follow Vernon.
So shoot out a date. What do you think, Ron? Knowing when all board members meet?
28th, Vernon, that's a regular board meeting, we could,
Does that work? Matt and Walter? Okay. 6 o'clock, and let's pick one more. That was a Monday night, March 28th in Vernon. And can we go ahead and round the first week of April?
So, April 6th, Brattleboro Town.
Yeah, with the whole preschool discussion and
Well, I thought that,
community.
in my book, it's Act 46 as well.
Well, we had a little discussion while you were sick last week.
Okay.
Sorry. So we said at our next regularly scheduled board meeting, we were going to do preschool community forum, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Not confused? So that would be April 6th. I don't really think we want to do Act 46 and preschool.
Can we do the 4th?
Can we do the 4th?
Well,
As an Act
I
46.
guess we have to talk to Brattleboro Town about a forum date, because you're missing something that we need to.
The 4th would be our meeting.
Yeah,
That would be a regular meeting.
Regular meeting.
Could you guys possibly meet early and we?
Yeah. That's just a.
BUHS also meets on the
I have a
You
hard
can't.
time getting
I
it
know, I
out of
forgot
work.
that, sorry.
How
Sorry.
about the 5th, Tuesday?
Yeah, we're on 16.
Tuesday. That's you're busy.
Yeah, it's fine, I'm always.
Okay, let's do that.
Two.
Thank you, Guilford.
That's in Guilford?
Yeah,
What day? On
6 o'clock on the 5th.
That's in Guilford?
Yeah, so on the 21st, we're invited to
Wanna move
Guilford.
Guilford?
Say that again?
Just talk to Guilford, you might want to move your meeting to that Tuesday.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So you don't have back-to-back meetings. You do that.
Okay, shall we schedule one more, or are we settled? What do you think, Amy? We good? One more?
Get it on the calendar.
Okay, let's get it on.
The week of the next week after that?
Week of the 11th,
Yeah, because vacation's coming up.
Dummerston meets on the 12th.
I am out of town that entire week.
Is everyone else in town?
This is the week of the 11th?
Yeah.
How about the 12th?
Dummerston the 12th?
Like a Wednesday?
Oh,
Yeah, Wednesdays work better.
Wednesday, who wants to host it?
13th.
For Bethany.
13's a good
Back
number.
for Brattleboro.
Okay,
Brattleboro?
Brattleboro?
Academy.
It holds more people, yeah.
Can we do, we've never done Oak Grove.
Is that for 13?
Yeah, you can do it for there's no.
Okay,
What day?
the 13th.
It's actually better because you can't do it. That's an arts night here on the 13th, so you can't be here.
So
Okay.
Oak Grove, 13th.
13th or the
All right.
12th?
12th or the 13th?
13th.
Okay, guys, I think we should wrap.
If anybody still remembers this point, if a motion requires a majority vote, it fails when there is a tie vote.
We found it. So there's no community forum scheduled except for Guilford on March 21st. Nobody else has a community forum scheduled?
Dummerston.
Michael
On the
is,
22nd.
Sorry?
Michael, my husband, is putting together a forum for everyone that he wants out, all the school boards, and it's gonna be open to the public, and he has speakers coming down from the state. And he will let you know what date that is as soon as it's confirmed.
I was thinking, you did say the end of March, right?
I don't know.
What is it gonna say? Okay. Anything else, guys?
I just would like to know when everybody else's town forums are when they get them, because then
Well, we're not doing them until after we have a semi-finalized article agreement.
No, you can do them ahead of time. They're just the ones
The ones now.
Yeah.
so do we still schedule any type of
Yeah.
discussion for us?
Well, it's 8:15.
Yeah.
Guys, what do you think? You come,
Okay.
okay, so there's a gentleman in the back. Can you please say where you're from and what your name is?
Scott Handler from Dummerston. So, just a couple questions. One is, we talked a lot about the school closure. I know it's important to people in Dummerston, not only maintaining control, but in the language of school closure, which was, I guess, 5 years with multiple votes. Is it my understanding that after 5 years, that all that's off the table and the super board can do whatever they want as far as coming up with new
My
rules and
understanding
regulations?
is that all of the provisions in this document would still be in play.
So it'd still be a one-year process of multiple meetings, discussions.
So that's,
After-
that's in there, that's for.
Yeah. No matter.
Nobody-
If it's in the articles,
Can't be changed.
that would be.
Is that, so our understanding is an article of agreement can't be changed
That's
by
right.
the super board?
Right.
It is a binding,
Do
that's our understanding.
you have
Yes.
authority for that?
What's that?
Is there authority for that?
Chris Leopold sent me that the first time you asked.
And did we get that in writing from him?
Yeah, we do.
It'd be smart to do that.
How would it change?
I shared that.
I would it'd be probably more
Okay,
protective if
you
we
didn't
had
raise
it.
your hand and we're going through.
Well,
Did you have one more thing? Because we're, the gentleman who was
Yes,
talking.
the last
Yeah.
point was, what is the process for the study committee for voting on going for the accelerated merger? I mean, at some point, do you take a vote, and
Yeah.
what would be that process, and how
So
does that work?
we'll talk, since it's so late and we're just listening right now, that will be discussed at the, yes, this is not a given back and forth, right? That will obviously, if we do vote, we'll go over, all over that for the committee. Go ahead.
Nancy Gillian, I find it unhelpful when a member of the public asks a question, a simple one that I think you know the answer to. I would love to know the answer to that question as well. And I also think that if the study committee is being told that this language is protective, that the entire study committee should demand and is entitled to a written opinion, not just from Chris Leopold, who will not be at the table if there's litigation in the future, but from the state, who would stand by that document. So a written opinion from the state is going to be the most protective thing that you have to ensure you that this document cannot be amended by a super board.
Charles Fish. Unfortunately, I have two questions, and since there's no exchange, I'll just leave you with the questions, and you can, when you're going to bed tonight, you can think about it. One is for Ron. Ron said that we really need to allocate the resources more prudently, more wisely. My question to him would be, do you think that's impossible in a collaborative association of the sort that Dick Birch has suggested? And the next meeting, if you will, you might answer that. And the question to the entire study committee is this: have you seriously entertained, or do you intend seriously to entertain any merger other than the accelerated? Or is the accelerated in fact what it's going to be? And that relates to my statement, not question. I'm concerned that the new wording here, there was discussion of tying a second possibility of a majority of the district voting and achieving another structure if the alternative structure didn't go through. I'm concerned that those two things have been tied together. It seems to me the purpose of this committee, as set out in its goals, was simply to put an alternative proposal together. The reason the legislature created the, accelerated proposal together. The reason the legislature created the accelerated proposal and said that it had to be unanimous for the district, I think that's being defeated by tying those two things together. I think we do need another year to study all of this. I think also the legislature has several proposals to modify Act 46, and we do need to see where those things are going. So I'm very much opposed to the idea of tying two different operations together in one vote. I think that those need to be separate. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I just wanted to comment on the fact that even though you put things in place, just because they're in place doesn't mean they're not changed. Vernon has had school choice for over 65 years, and it's been actually questioned through the legislature more than 5 times in those 65 years. So it doesn't matter what you've put here, and the legislature doesn't understand what they've actually put in place. They can change it. Not only that, but most of you here probably won't be here in a few years or on the boards, and things can change with the personnel. The leap of faith that I hear about, the goodwill that you folks are all trying to achieve, that can change. And I think we need to be fully aware and protect ourselves.
All right. Yeah, one last. Go ahead.
It feels a little bit like an upcoming primary with 4 options and being able to only vote on one. And I just would like to ask how things that we talked about here tonight around the sort of self-study that you did, how would that be different under unification? Or could it continue to operate? If we can prove that we're making progress in terms of equity, efficiencies, and all the rest of that, under this governance structure, could that continue? And I would really like to hear from this board as to a committee how they're feeling about that as an option. And I know it's coming late to the party, and it's a lot of work that's already gone on. It just seems like there's a train headed down the track, and it's got one passenger, and it's going to be difficult to stop it. I just think that there ought to be, people ought to know, and it's a lot of work to find out what the options are and understanding this language of this act. But I would particularly like to know how people feel about a self-study and maybe doing a collaborative or kind of program rather than restructuring rather than, and I don't know what's really driving this accelerated other than maybe time and taxes, which are unfortunately probably not 2 of the best reasons to do it. So, thank you.
We ran out of time. It's some of those things were on the agenda, so, well, is there a motion to adjourn floating around?
So
A second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.